Jack Spade back here with you, High Noon Leatherworks, for another leather adventure. And today we're going to do part 2 and the conclusion of the Ruger Wrangler cross draw holster. So come on in and let's get started. Alright, so if you saw the previous video, part 1, we did the pattern for the cross draw and the cant, or the angle that we wanted it at. We cut out our pre-dyed leather, approximately 6 ounce, and we had a real unique spot on our leather where this cow had been branded, so we've got a brand in there. Of course, that'll be behind the holster itself. You'll be able to see just the corner of it, but it adds kind of a neat thing to it. And then this, as you can see, this holster has some real, or this leather has some real unique characteristic stripes in it. So just a real unique, neat piece of leather for this holster. Now what I'm going to do next, I also had cut out the strip for my hold down, and I did acquire my small buckle for that. So we have all the pieces we need for that also. Now, after that video off camera, I did bevel my edge all the way around the outside. I did not do the inside. So I just did the outside of the holster itself. I did not do the strap. I'm going to take some Fibings saddle soap, and this will help clean and protect this piece of leather. And in the last episode I explained that I picked up this leather in a flea market in a big bundle or roll of smaller pieces that a leather company had put together. So I'm just gonna clean this up just a little bit with some saddle soap. It'll also help protect it. I don't necessarily want, normally I use sheen as my protectant, but I don't necessarily want to put a shiny sheen on this holster. Normally I do, but on this one I don't want to, so I'm going to use this saddle soap instead. And I'm using just an old cut off piece of a sweatshirt sleeve is what I'm using to apply that with, because it's soft. It doesn't have any fraying or pieces coming off of it. So I'll just go around the entire finished side, or the finished surface of this leather, and notice I'm going in circular motions, not real small, tight circular motions, but I'm also making sure that I get the entire area. And you'll notice I keep going back to my saddle soap, because I do want it coated really well. And you can tell it didn't really darken that up very much at all, if at all, but you can see just a little bit now. Has a tiny satin look to it. It's not super shiny like Sheen puts on it, but it is clean, and now it has that satin finish on it to where it's going to be protected also. And I'm on my own personal stuff. I'm real funny and particular about carrying my firearms out in the weather anyway. I'm a fair weather shooter when it comes to target practice and things like that. I don't take my stuff out in the rain or snow or anything like that, not out in the elements. So should be fine. That'll also keep that from drying out, makes it a little more supple. So now we're ready to move on. Other than the bevel that I put on the outside, I also went through off camera and put my groove in for my stitch, or my stitching groove. And that groove I put in at 3/16 of an inch from the edge. That's gonna be where my stitches fit down in there, and also it's gonna allow me to follow that groove so that I get a good consistent line on my punch for my stitches, my stitching punch. So I'm going to start right at 1/8 of an inch in from the top side, put my stitching punch right in that groove. This is a 4-prong punch, and it is center to center. They're 1/4 inch apart. Normally I use a closer punch than that, but I want to try this one. I have not used this one before, so I want to try it out. And this leather isn't that super thick, so I am punching through that leather into another thicker piece of leather so that I get good penetration through that top piece. And that saddle soap, believe it or not, will also help release that stitching punch. Makes it easier to pull that punch out. Now I start to get a little bit of curve here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark my holes at an angle real slightly. Then I'm going to take my single punch, go to that next hole that's marked, and punch through there, because I don't want to get off of my stitching groove. And then I'll do the same thing on the next two, and then use my single punch so that I can stay on my grooved mark and I don't get off of there. Because you get into that wide, that's not quite an inch, but you get into that onto a curved surface, and you'll be got to be careful, or one or two of your punches, teeth in your punch will go off of your groove, and that never looks good. So there we are on that side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some contact cement, And I'm just going to take a small amount of that and hit that on the inside where my stitches will go, on the side that isn't punched yet. And then I'll take any excess off of that. Go over to the other side where I just punched my holes. And do the same thing. So I'm just putting a light coat, and what that's going to do is that's going to allow me to go back once this tacks up and put those two pieces together, and then travel or follow my holes from the front that I just put in there into the back. I've done that several different ways in previous videos where I did not use contact cement, and I don't think I've ever done that as far as I know on stitching, but somebody made that suggestion in a previous video, and I wanted to try it. And I think it will help as far as the first few stitches. Once you get 3 or 4 stitches in the beginning, it doesn't seem, it holds it down anyway, but I want to try that. So we'll let that dry up a little bit and get tacky before we put that over and make contact from one side to the other there. I do have my 2 needles. I am going to do a hand saddle stitch, which is my preferred stitch that I like to use, and then I'm going to use the natural colored synthetic sinew, and it is waxed. So let's go ahead, and it's starting to dry. It's tacky, but it's not coming off on my finger. Let's fold this over. Match up those sides. And push that down, make contact, and work my way up and down. Make sure those are sandwiched together. And what that's going to do is that's going to hold that together while I put my holes all the way through the back side, so that I know they line up perfectly. And then that'll also hold that together while I'm stitching. That'll just make that much stronger of a stitch there on that seam. So again, I'm going through front and the back piece now. Make sure I'm going into another piece of thicker leather. Make sure that I'm getting all the way through. Work my way down. And now that I get on this curve again, I'm going to go back to my single punch. And just follow those holes from front to back. I'm done with my punches. Go ahead and set those aside. Go ahead and tap that down with my mallet. Make sure that that's making great contact right there. Got my holes all the way through the back from the front. Now I can go ahead and prepare my sinew or my thread. And again, if you go back and take a look at some of my previous videos, I talk about how I do 4 times the length of my stitch. So I'll measure that out, and normally I give a little extra, 1.5 inches or so on each end. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and fold it over one more time, and 4. And then, just to be safe, I'd rather have too much than not enough, so I'll go a half. So 4.5 times the full length of my stitch. And that's when I'm doing a saddle stitch, because I will use 2 needles, and the sinew will go through the hole twice. So you do use a lot more than what you would think, but it does make it really strong. So I'll thread my first needle. I'll let about 6 inches hang through that needle, the eye, and I can pull that through as I need it. And you can do whatever is comfortable for you. Put the other end of your thread or sinew through, and then you want to make sure that what you pulled through the first needle matches the second, so that you end up with approximately the same amount on each end when you're done. So I'll pull those to where the lengths pretty much match through the needles, and then I'll pull that or cinch that down around that needle. Some people put the needle through the sinew, split the sinew. I don't do that. I just have pretty good luck doing it this way. And then I'm going to start at the top and work my way to the bottom of the holster. I'll go from the front to the back. I do have a very small pair of needle nose, which if you've seen any of my previous videos, you've seen me use those before when stitching. But I'll pull that needle through, and then sometimes it'll get a little tough to get all the way through there. I just grab it with my needle nose. Make sure you're always pulling good and straight so that you don't bend or break your needle. And then pull that snug, both threads, and match your needles up so that your thread's the same length on both sides. Then I can take my top needle, go through my second hole, pull that through and just barely snug it down, because if you keep pulling on it, it'll pull your second needle or your second thread through. Now take the one that's in the back that came through the first hole and put it through the back of the second hole. So you're going back to front now. Pull that through. And now you can pull on the front and the back thread and lock that stitch in. Take the back needle that you put through the second hole and go back from the back to the front in the first hole. And again, it may be a little tight, a little snug. You're going to pull that and snug that down. Then we can take the needle that came from the back and go through the third hole from the front to the back. Now that leaves this needle from the front. I want to go in the second hole. That's the second time I've done that, and that's called a lock stitch. So I'll lock that in. This is where it may get a little snug, and you want to use those needle nose to pull that needle through that hole, because you've already got two thicknesses of thread through there. And then pull that nice and tight. So now we've got a lock stitch in the first hole. We've started our second stitch. All we have to do is take the needle that we just put through the second hole, front to back, and take it back to front. Now we've got our needles. Lock that in. We've got our needles coming through the same hole again, just like we did when we first started. Now we can work our way down, just going through front to back to the next hole. Snug that down. I always pull it toward me to pull that, cinch that down toward me and open up that hole for my needle to go from back to front through the same hole. So each time I lock that stitch in. So we're going double lock stitch at the very first two holes. So we put it through there twice. Then we just work our way down. Front to back. Take the needle from the back and go back to front. And snug it down. So we're going to continue that on down all the way till we get to the last two holes, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how we're going to finish this out. Alright, so I'm back down now to the bottom with the last two holes. So basically I'm going to do the same thing I did at the top. to make this at the end twice as strong as I did the rest of my stitches, just like I did when I started. I'm going to continue to the next hole, front to back, back to front, again snug that down nice and tight. Then I'm in my last hole here. I'm going to go front to back, back needle to front in the last hole, and again, the more thicknesses of needle you get, or thread that you get in there, the tighter that's going to be. Now I'm going to back up. So I'm going to back up one hole, go to my second hole from the end, just like I did at the beginning. And this is definitely going to get tighter, because now you're putting more thicknesses of thread through there. Push that needle through. Again, it helps if you have some nice small needle nose pliers. And then I'll go back through, back to front. And then I want to make sure when I do this lock stitch at the end, when I'm terminating it, that I get it nice and snug. I really want to get that nice and tight, because that is terminating my stitch there. Then I'm going to take my front needle, and I'm only going to go through the top layer of leather and punch it. I'm going to turn that and punch it out between those thicknesses. So I'm not going all the way through both, just the top layer. Pull that thread just through the top layer. That comes out between the two thicknesses. Grab my needle that was in the back, and I'm going to do the same thing. Last hole, only through the back thickness, come out between the thicknesses of leather, and pull that through. Make both of those nice and snug. I can pull my needles off. You can see I ended up with plenty of excess sinew, which is no problem. Then I'm going to terminate that with a square knot. Now, the nice thing about doing that, when you come through just one thickness and terminate it, is you cannot see your knot. You don't have a knot on the back. It's inside, so it's hidden. Let me grab my lighter here, and what I'll do is I'll cut that off, and I normally cut it off just about even with my leather right here. You can see the thread sticking out just a little bit, and I'll stick my finger in there, or you could use your needle nose, just enough that I can light this flame and move it in ever so slightly till you see that wax start melting on your thread. Then I push it down in there with the point of my needle nose, and then hit it with my mallet, and that's going to terminate my knot inside the leather. So on this side it's finished, and on the front side it's finished. So you don't have a knot showing, and you have a double stitch there at the end, just like you did at the beginning. Makes it nice and durable. So there's my stitching done. I can kind of stick my fingers in there now and stretch that out a little bit toward that seam. And then the next thing I need to work on is go ahead and put my strap, cut my strap and get it on. So let's go ahead and put it in from the back side. And I'll put each in from the back in through the two slots and tighten that down real good and tight. I don't want to leave any excess back here on the back side. I want that nice and flat. So I'm going to stretch that, pull that tight, flip my holster over, make sure it's folded exactly where I want. And I'm going by my backside piece here, how much I have around the outside, and I'm going by my angle or my cant here. And you can see how that angles up or down. And that's what's going to give me my cross draw angle. So I'll fold this over, and I want it to be held pretty snug. So I'm going to make a mark where I want to put my buckle on one end. And I'll just center that up. I'm just going to eyeball it. You can measure it if you want. And I'm going to take my stylus and put just a little dot right where I want that prong to come up through the center. Then I'll grab my poly cutting board, and I'm going to take, I believe this is an 1/8 inch punch, yeah. And you could stitch this if you want, but I'm just going to put a rivet in there. And I'll show you how I'm going to do that. This is for the this is for the prong in the middle, the fastener. So I'll put the prong in the hole. Then this piece, the end of the strap, will come around like so, and I'm going to pull this back out so that I have room to work. And I've already got that stretched so I know where it goes back. But I'm going to pull that out so I have room to work on this because I've already got it measured. And you can see where that prong goes through that hole. Then I'm going to fold that over, and I'm going to put my rivet as close to that as I can. I want to try to hide part of my rivet underneath the buckle, and then the rest of it will be hidden when I take the other end of the strap and put it through the buckle. So I can flip my board over where I have a flat spot, and put my hole in for my rivet. Now I can turn it over and I've got a mark where my hole goes on the other side. Match that up. And put that through. Now I can grab a rivet and my setter, and I'm just getting a 5/16. I'll go up from the bottom through both pieces, snap my cap on. I don't want to hit my buckle, so I'll put that on off the edge. Put my setter on there. And then there's my rivet that locks on my buckle. And notice how I put it to where half of it's covered up with the buckle when it's closed. Now I can go ahead and cut the excess off of this. And I want to be super careful not to cut through, obviously, my second piece. So I'll use a piece of scrap and slide that on there to actually cut on, so I don't cut through the piece I want to save or my actual strap. So now I've got that cut, I can go ahead and put this back through. And get that set again where I want that buckle in the center. And again, this is adjustable. I'm not going to put anything back here that holds that strap in place, so I can move this anytime I want. I just want it to make sure that I have enough on here that I can keep this in place so it doesn't move around on the back flap. So I'll take my stylus again, locate where I want the end of my strap to come, mark it. I'm going to roll that over and lay it down flat. Let me flip my board back over to my cutting side, and I'll take a rounding punch and cut that off. Now I have a nice rounded end for my strap. Now all I have to do is put my strap through my buckle, tighten that up, and then I can see where my hole needs to go. And I can either make that with my latch pin, or I can make a mark with my stylus. And I'm only going to need one hole. You could add holes at any point, or you could put multiple holes now. But I'm only going to put one hole and then slide my strap through the other side of the buckle, and there's my finished piece. I've got my rounded edge here. All that covers up my rivet. You don't see it at all. And I've got my buckle in the center this way. Now, I didn't rivet it or anything in the back, so I could still move that buckle anywhere I want and adjust that. So let me grab the Ruger Wrangler and I'll be right back. Alright, so here's the Ruger Wrangler we were making the holster for. It is empty. So let's test fit it. Let's see how it fits. And it fits in there real nice. Remember when we made our pattern in the last episode, I wanted to make sure that my hammer was exposed so that when you drew it, you could be easy to cock as you drew it out of your holster. And I wanted to make sure that my trigger guard was exposed. So the way I made my pattern, it worked out great that my trigger guard comes right down to the edge of the holster. You look in the end, I've got about a ½ inch my end of my barrel before it comes out the end. So if you wanted to, you could work this down a little bit further and form this edge to kind of let the lip of that trigger guard go in there, which would be very easy to do. You got plenty of room here if you wanted to do that. There's the Ruger Wrangler cross draw project completed. Turned out really nice with the hold down strap. There's the back side. The Wrangler fits in there real nice. And then the angle or the cant turned out great. So there's where my belt is. That's where it would actually lay at an angle like that as a cross draw. So it would be very easy to carry, to draw, very handy. So if you like this video, please smash the like button. If you haven't yet, please smash the subscribe button. I would appreciate it very much. And share it with a friend, maybe somebody that has interest in this kind of stuff. I'd appreciate it. So thanks for coming along. Hope you enjoyed it. And as I always say, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.